If you ask yourself, why am I here? What is my purpose? How can I fulfill my potential? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Lifestyle, Relationships, and Career Human Design Podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa Naja from vanessanaja.com. My mission is to help you be on purpose and fulfill your potential by aligning in body, mind, and spirit so you can feel empowered, joyful, connected, and free. I'm so excited to share with you how to do that through human design. If it feels aligned, I'd love it if you subscribe and share. Now let's get to the episode. It's always a good idea to have your human design chart with you when listening. You can get yours for free at my website, vanessanaja.com/free chart. Link is in the show notes.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 18 of the Lifestyle, Relationship, and Career Human Design Podcast. And today, and for the next 8 weeks, so 9 weeks total, we are going to dive into each one of the human design centers. And starting with the head center today. I did do an introduction to the centers in episode 3, so it's an overview of all of them. It talks a little bit more about centers in general and what they represent. So I highly recommend listening to that episode if you haven't already listened to it. But just a short recap, centers, which are known as functions in BG5, the business application of human design, they kind of govern how you function. They are areas, centers of energy that are responsible for certain energies in your life, in your world. And these are areas that, depending on how your design is configured, they are going to operate differently. They are going to indicate how you function depending on how they are configured. So you will want to, it's a good idea to have your chart ready so you can look at your head center today. And the head center, it's also known as the crown sometimes. In BG5, it's known as the inspiration function, is the triangle at the very top of the chart. If you have this colored in, which only 30% of the population do, that means that this center is defined for you. And if it is not colored in, 70% of the population, it is undefined. And when a center is defined, that means that this is energy that you have consistent access to. You broadcast this out into the world, and other people that have the center undefined will pick that energy up from you. And as I just said, if you have it undefined, you're picking this energy up from other people. And the undefined centers are kind of like receiving dishes. So you can take in this energy from other people and amplify it. The energy is inconsistent for you. It's not reliable in how it shows up. It's going to show up differently depending on who you're around. It can also be affected by planetary transits. And in your undefined centers, so if you have this undefined or not colored in, you actually have a potential for very, very great wisdom in this area. And it can also be an area of distraction for you. This can be a place where you can also be conditioned. So we will talk about how both of this works with the head center. Now, the head center is in charge of thinking, inspiration. It is a pressure center, which means it creates mental pressure to think, to figure things out, to be inspired. And if you have this defined, you're going to be under some consistent mental pressure. And if you have it undefined, you actually may be amplifying pressure from other people. Now, the thing with pressure, and we do have 2 pressure centers. The other one is the root, which I will get to later in the series. The thing about pressure is it's always there. And when we are in our low expression, we can try to do all kinds of things to get out from under the pressure, and we can go to these places to make decisions. So steering away from our authority, making decisions that are incorrect for us because we're trying to get rid of the pressure. And really the secret is to learn to recognize the pressure is there and just to allow it to be there and to be okay with that. And just to make sure it's not influencing you to do hasty decisions, to rush into things, to override your authority. That is kind of the trick to it. Now, if you have the head center defined, and the center governs inspiration, thinking. You probably have a consistent way of thinking. You may really enjoy your thinking and your thoughts that come through. You're inspiring to others with what you share with them. The head center, there are a lot of questions live in the head center, and this is the area where we receive the questions of why, how, and what. Doubt lives here. Inner knowing lives here. Confusion also lives here. And again, we can feel under pressure to work out the doubt and the confusion and go into places or make decisions that are not good for us. So there's a lot of questions that live in the head center. And the thing is, those questions only get asked there, they do not get answered there. The answers usually come to you somehow through the outside. So learning to use your head center to just question things without trying to answer those questions and allowing the answers to just appear to you in the right time and trusting that process is really important. Also, because depending on how your head center is configured, you may experience consistent doubt and confusion, and you may constantly be trying to figure that out. You may also, in its slow expression, turn that doubt and confusion in on yourself, and that can create a lot of mental anxiety. So it is okay to be doubtful. It is okay to be confused and to trust that that will resolve on its own time. The answers will come when the time is right, and not turn that doubt and confusion in on yourself. Now, if you have this center undefined, which I do, and this is actually my only undefined center, so it's very significant because it's my only undefined center. It really adds an extra like layer to my chart of how I experience this. And in the undefined center, you are likely to take in the thoughts, the questions, the inspiration from other people around you all the time. You might be feeling inspired all the time. You might be feeling curious all the time. You might want to know everything. And th- both in the defined and in the undefined variation, there's a binary here. This can show up in its low expression, it can show up in its high expression. And in the low expression, having your head center or any center undefined, this is a place where you can really easily be conditioned by other people that have it defined. So just something to be aware of. A lot of our conditioning shows up in our undefined centers. And as you learn to embody your human design, as you learn to follow your strategy and authority, you will naturally go through the deconditioning process. So just something to be aware of. And remember, it's always important. Just go back to your strategy and authority and be really careful that you are not making decisions in this particular instance out of mental pressure or taking your decision-making process up into this center. Listen to your unique strategy and authority to allow life to guide you. Undefined centers can also, in this particular instance, the undefined head center, this can be a place of losing focus and becoming very distracted. And this can show up in a number of different ways. And one of those is that you might constantly be trying to answer other people's questions. You might think about things that really don't matter. So remember, this is a center of thinking and inspiration. You might be lost in mental dialogues all the time or monologues. You might be, rehashing conversations that you had or planning conversations that you're never going to have. And just constantly, things are just constantly swirling around. And a good habit to get into is to just notice what's going on up there. Starting to notice and even verbally label, like, oh, I'm thinking about things that don't matter. And then bringing yourself back to the present. Or I'm trying to answer other people's questions, or I'm trying to solve other people's problems. And this is a big thing for me, especially the answering other people's questions. So, again, this is my only open center. So, there's a lot of stuff shows up here. I find myself, if somebody asks a question, and this is especially fun on social media, because you come across a lot of questions on social media, I immediately feel like I have to answer this question. And if I don't know the answer, then I start researching it. And you can imagine that this wastes a lot of time and it's just unnecessary. And but there is that pressure. I feel this pressure like, oh, there's a question, I have to answer it. And no, I do not need to answer it. I do not need to answer that question. If it's a question that I find relevant, that I really want to answer, that my strategy and authority are like, yes, this is a great question for you to answer, then that's the right thing for me to do. And if it's something I don't really care about, that's not the right question for me to answer. So if you have the center open and 70% of us do, you do want to be aware. Are you trying to answer people's questions? Are you losing focus, getting distracted from what you're meant to be doing? Are you feeling inspired all the time? So another thing that can happen with the undefined head is that you're picking up other people's inspirations all the time. And what can happen here is you might be in a conversation with someone, you might even just be sitting next to somebody, and all of a sudden this big inspiration comes through, and you feel like, oh my God, I absolutely must do this. And then 15 minutes later, when you're no longer around them, you don't care anymore. So that means it wasn't an inspiration that was actually meant for you. And the thing you want to be careful of, especially if you're, say somebody is inspiring you with their defined head or their inspirations and ideas, and they invite you into a project. And because at that moment you're feeling really inspired, you just automatically say yes and you override your strategy and authority. And now you've committed to something that 15 minutes later you are no longer interested in. That can be a problem. So remember, the solution to all of these things that come up for us in human design is going back to your strategy and authority. That's the most important, most practical part. And you can always go back. I went over all the types where the strategies are listed in previous episodes. We just covered all of the authorities. It's a good idea to go back and review those episodes to really anchor into your strategy and authority. And remember, this is not an overnight process. This can take a little bit of time, and that is okay. You just start to work with it, and the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. And one more note about the head center. If you have this defined, when it comes to practices like meditation, and and for some undefined, this also figures in, it might be really, really difficult for you to actually quiet your mind. And you want to be very careful about, you know, for example, Vipassana meditation, where you are, sitting quietly, and a lot of people think, oh, I need to quiet my mind or I'm not doing it right. That's actually not what it's about. You want to just notice your thoughts. And for you with the defined head, you might have a lot more thoughts coming through, and it might take a lot longer to quiet your mind. And that's okay. You can just notice, oh, I'm thinking about this, let it just flow through. Just try not to hold on to any of the thoughts or get lost in mental monologue. Also, Vipassana might not be the best type of meditation for you. You may try things like chanting, meditations that involve mantras so that you can actually connect your mind to something. You also may want to try things like, for example, yoga nidra or guided meditations, where there is something to hang on to, something that your mind can connect to. You also may find that you actually have an easier time meditating when you are lying down versus sitting up. So these are all some things to try out. Follow your strategy and authority to see what the best way is for you. And that is it for the head center overview. Thank you so much for listening. And if you want to dive deeper into your centers, the way they are configured very much ties to what centers you have defined and what you have undefined. And I go into this in my in-depth human design report. I will drop a link in the show notes for that if you are interested. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye.
That's it for today's episode. I know your time is important, and I'm so grateful you chose to spend it with me. It would mean the world to me if you engage with the episode by liking, subscribing, commenting, and letting me know any questions you have or what else you'd like to learn about. And the absolute best compliment is if you share with someone you think will benefit. It really helps me spread the message. Love and blessings to you.